Hey everyone, my name is Lily and I'm the book blogger behind Utopia State of Mind, and today I'm going to talk about some series that I would like to read in 2021 that are extremely hyped that I have not read and or finished. I'm going to be starting off with books where I haven't read any of the series at all, and so these are probably going to maybe come as a surprise to you because a lot of the ones that I'm going to be talking about are really hyped. So the first one I want to talk about is probably one of the most hyped ones like on this list that I haven't read. I know I've talked a little bit about how I haven't read it on the internet and people have been very surprised, but it's definitely The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I have not actually read any Holly Black like ever. And so, The Cruel Prince is very hyped, and so I would like to read some of it in 2021. I also want to point out that for a lot of these, I won't be able to finish the series just because there are a lot of series on this list, and so I guess for me, I'm going to use 2021 to read, the first one in a series and figure out if I want to continue the series. But I've heard so much hype about The Cruel Prince. If you've spent a little bit of time like in the YA book Twitter sphere or book community sphere, you will kind of have also seen a lot of hype about The Cruel Prince. As I said, I have not read any of it like ever, and so I'm interested to see, coming at it from someone who, the entire trilogy is done, so I'm interested to see, coming from that perspective, how I will feel about The Cruel Prince, also knowing how hyped it is. A lot of these series, there's a huge amount of hype around them, and so I feel like for that it can go both ways. Either I think, okay, the hype is really justified, or I think, wow, the hype really let me down. So we'll see how it is with The Cruel Prince. Next one has to be the Shatter Me series. I have not read this at all. I've actually only read one of Tahara Mafi's books before, and that was A Very Large Expanse of Sea, which I really loved, but I have never read any of Tahara Mafi's fantasy stuff. So I'm excited for Shatter Me because it has a lot of hype, and also I feel like, I don't know if the series is done. I feel like I keep thinking it's done, and then I keep seeing that there are more books published from this series. So at the moment I only have this, like, the first sort of paperback trilogy, and so I'm gonna kind of stick with that until I really figure out if I love the series. But I'm really excited about that because I have read one of Mafi's other books and I really do like that, and I'm interested to see about all the hype for this one. The next one has to be The Young Elites. I actually don't have a copy of this one yet. Marie Lu is an author where I've read a lot of her books. So I've read Kingdom of Back, I've now read most of the Legend trilogy stuff, so I just haven't read The Young Elites, and I was kind of not sure if I was going to read it because also in my mind I got The Young Elites and Legend completely mixed up. But reading reviews from my friends who read, The Young Elites when it was published, or just read The Young Elites, I really think that I'm intrigued by the main character, and I do want to read that one because I've seen more kind of a resurgence of hype, specifically with some bookish pins for The Young Elites, so I'm interested to kind of now get into it. I judge a lot of how much there is hype or love for a book by book merch and by book swag in book boxes and stuff like that, because I think that that can be a good indicator of what kind of fandoms and what kind of books people are really interested in still. So that's kind of how I'm judging it a little bit as well, because I think that for a lot of these ones that are older that are hyped, I'm not necessarily seeing, every day something posted about them. It's more that, oh, another box featured, this book in a subscription box. So that's kind of what I'm judging it off of. The next one has to be another hugely hyped. I would say that of the books in this video that I'm doing, this is it's on par with The Cruel Prince, and that's the Grishaverse. So Shadow and Bone, this trilogy, I've not read this trilogy at all. I've only read Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo, and Ninth House, but that's not in the Grishaverse world. So I'm excited to kind of go back, and I'm a little bit apprehensive because from what I've heard, people, when I first picked up Six of Crows, because I asked if I had to have read this trilogy before reading Six of Crows, people said no, and I agree with that. But people were also saying that the writing has improved since this trilogy. This is only what I've heard, so I can't judge it based on that, but I am interested to read this trilogy before the Netflix series comes out because there is a ton of hype over that. And I also haven't read King of Scars or Rule of Wolves, which are also coming. Well, Rule of Wolves is coming out this year. King of Scars already came out. So I'm excited and apprehensive about this one. But I definitely think that if I'm going to continue supporting or continue like reading, I guess, the Grishaverse books, I probably should read this to give me a foundation of what kind of the world is about. So yeah, I'm excited and apprehensive about this one. The next one is also super hyped, but I don't have a copy yet, and it's The Bone Season. I've heard so much about this, especially like this year, because I think one of the sequels is coming out, I think, in 2021. So I thought it would be a good idea to kind of get into the series, because I've heard from a lot of people that I really like that they really like this series, and I've also heard that it's kind of a dystopian, taking down the government kind of vibe, and I'm really into that vibe, and so I'm excited about that. And especially since I've been seeing more hype this, like in 2020 and 2021, mostly I think because of the sequel, but in general I'm really excited for that one. And then the last one on my sort of segment of books where I haven't read any of the trilogy or series is Winter Song. That's only a duology, but I've seen a lot of hype for this one. Less so than I think the other ones that I mentioned, but still hype with people that I really admire who've read Winter Song, and so I'm excited. All I really know is that it has kind of music stuff and maybe a goblin king kind of thing, so I'm really excited. Also, the cover is gorgeous, and I actually own both book 1 and book 2, so Winter Song and I think Shadow Song, so I'm excited to read that. And I think that the Backlist Bookworms is going to read this one next. Backlist Bookworms is a book club, an online Twitter book club that I co-host with Vicky, and I will leave Vicky's links below. And so I think our next pick will be Winter Song. Basically, we read a book about basically every month, and we chat about it on Twitter, and they're all Backlist books. So I'm excited to read that for this one. And next I'm going to talk about some book series that I want to read the sequels to where I've read the first one. These also has a ton of hype surrounding these series, so let's just start. The first one is Caraval. I only for some reason have an arc of this one, and I also don't even really know how I got this. I think someone like was asking if they were getting rid of it and wanted to know if I wanted a copy of Caraval, but I don't think I knew that it was an arc, and I was just like, oh, okay. And I thought it was a paperback until I saw that it said arc on the top, but whatever. I read Caraval and I listened to it on audiobook, and it was okay. And I think for me, I wanted to read Caraval because I heard about this magical fantasy vibe, but it was also with some sisters, so sister relationships is like one of my weak spots, I guess. But then in Caraval, I don't think I really got the sister relationship that I was expecting. But a lot of people said that if you didn't like Caraval, they also liked Legendary a lot more. So I'm excited to read Legendary just because of that, because I was really on the fence if I was going to continue the series, even though it's so hyped. But because people said that, I'm willing to give Legendary a go. The next one, which is also like in the list of super, super hyped ones, is A Darker Shade of Magic. I've read the first one, and I have just not read the second and third. I remember reading the first one and being like, yes, I'm so excited, I want to read books 2 and 3. And then here I am now. It's just that things come up, and since the entire trilogy was sort of out, there wasn't ever that impetus where I thought, okay, I need to read it, you know, for a book review or whatever, because I was kind of like, a lot of people love this, it's super hyped. My review isn't going to make a difference because everybody loves this and every book box loves this one. But I do want to read it because I did really like reading the first one, and so I am interested to see how the series goes, especially now because I thought there was an announcement of maybe like not a sequel, but some sort of thing related to this world. And I know there's comic books and everything like that. So there are kind of things that I could potentially read afterwards if I really liked this series. So I'm very excited. And also I skipped the story in the A Universe of Wishes, We Need Diverse Books anthology project, which had to do with A Darker Shade of Magic. So I'm hoping that once I finish the trilogy, I can go back and read that one, because I wanted to read it, but I couldn't because I didn't want to like spoil myself. And I started reading a little bit, but I had forgotten so much about some of the characters that I really thought, okay, I'm going to read this one, and then I'll go back, and then I'll read that story. The next one is Three Dark Crowns. I can't find my copy. I have a paperback copy because I went to like an Epic Reads event, and it was, I can't even remember what it was called, but it was basically an Epic Reads version of BookCon, so with authors and panels and stuff like that. And I ended up going, and they gave me a copy, and they gave me a copy of a few other things. I think like The Upside of Unrequited and one of Adam Silvera's books. And so I have a paperback copy of Three Dark Crowns, and I have no idea where it is. I think it's probably behind one of these stacks of hardcovers, because that's where I tend to put books where I've already read. On the Outward ones, it's really only books I haven't read. So it's somewhere, I think, but I looked for it and I couldn't find it. But anyway, Three Dark Crowns, I remember reading it and just thinking that there was such a really long lead up to when I started to be really excited about it, like around the last third, around the last 25%, when all of these kinds of action plots were being brought up and events and stuff like that. And so I remember thinking, okay, I am kind of interested to know what happens in the next one, but I also feel like it took me a lot of work to get here and a lot of emotional labor to get here. So yeah, but a friend of mine actually kept reading the series, and so she did say that it gets better, and like it kind of capitalizes on that action and momentum from the first one. I haven't read the first one now in so long that I might need to find a recap somewhere, but I do intend on reading the second one, at least so I can figure out if I want to read them, because after the second one, I think there's like 4 or 5 of them, right? So if I ended up liking them, then I would have more to read, and I'm pretty sure that series is done. And the next one, which is super, super hyped, especially in like the YA sci-fi community, is Illuminae. I listened to it on audiobook, so actually I haven't really even like looked at the inside, because I listened to it on audiobook mostly because it has a full cast audio recording, and I really loved it because it felt very cinematic movie-esque, whereas in this one they have a lot of transcripts and a lot of like passages like that where I think I would read it and like it a lot, but I don't think I would get that like cinematic sci-fi feel that I really got when listening to the first one, which really kind of made me keep wanting to listen to it day after day. But when I read Gemina, I do think that I will kind of page through it as I listen to it on the audiobook, so I can really appreciate the unique formats and transcripts and like all the sorts of document things that are in the book. But I definitely recommend the full cast audio because, as I said, it makes it more cinematic, and also it just makes it very fun and almost like people are actually talking to you. But I will read, it would be great if I could finish Gemina and Obsidio in this year, but all bets are off. I don't know, honestly, how 2021 is going to treat me and treat my reading. So all I can say is that I hope that I read Gemina, because I did really like Illuminae, and it did surprise me because I felt like, for me, the hype was worth it. So I'm excited to read the next one, or listen to the next one. And the last book I want to talk about in this specific section is a book that I've read almost all of the series, and it's the Ember and the Ashes series. I've read books 1, 2, and 3, and I just need to read the last one. So this is one of the ones where it's like, for the books before, it's like I like to read these. It's my projected, ambitious 2021 Series TBR, but this one is like, yes, you're reading the 4th one when your library hold comes off, which is going to take 6 months, then you'll read it, and that'll just be it. So this is one of the ones besides Winter Song that I feel most confident that I will actually read, and so I'm just excited to read it. I've kind of read books 1, 2, and 3 within the span of 6 months in 2020. I think I listened to An Ember in the Ashes in pandemic, like when the pandemic was just starting, which is like, what is the world even that I can say that sentence right now? But I think it was around March or April. And then I read book 2, I think in August, and I was supposed to read book 3 in September, and I didn't read book 3 in September. I read it in December. So I guess my goal would theoretically be to read it before March or April, so that then I could read it like within a calendar year, and I'd feel super, super great. But as I said, my library hold I don't think will come out for 5 or 6 months, and I'm separated by pandemic land and by, the pandemic from my actual physical copy of the 4th book. So, it just is what it is. And next I wanted to talk about some series where I've read a lot of them, and I promise you, which is a very dangerous thing to say, but I promise you that I will keep up with them just because they are series that have made such an impact in my life, and they are so precious to me. The first one I want to talk about is Jade City. I've read and adored Jade City and Jade War. Like, the No Peak clan has my entire heart. They are so great. I cry basically every single book. I'm so excited for Jade Legacy, like, so excited. I actually don't know how to tell you how excited I am for it. And, you know, that's going to be, I'm going to sound like a broken record by the time I get through with this section. But I love this series so much. Magical Jade, family clan. Like, if you have not read Jade City, read Jade City and Jade War before Jade Legacy comes out, because you will not regret it. Like, this is a hard recommendation. You will not regret it. The next one that I want to read is Twisted Fates. This is actually a trilogy, and it starts with Stolen Time, which I also cannot find. I own it. I swear I own it. I cannot find it. Anyway, going back to Twisted Fates, it's one of my favorite time-traveling sci-fi espionage kind of things. I remember reading Stolen Time and being so shocked and being like, oh my god, I cannot believe that even happened. So I'm very excited for Twisted Fates, and I hope it lives up to my expectations, because I've been hyping up Stolen Time a lot. The next sequel I'm very excited for is the sequel to Nocturna. I think it's called Occulta, but I will leave all the links, of course, to the first ones and the sequels down below. So if I've made a mistake, which is very likely, it will be down below corrected. But I loved Nocturna so much. It is a gorgeous, just stunning book, and I loved the world building and how it talks about colonialism, and also just the magic idea of like face changing magic, and the characters were just so great. So I'm very excited to read the sequel, and I think it also got pushed back. Like, I legit thought that the sequel was going to be published in 2020, and I think it got pushed back to 2021 because of pandemic land, or like pandemic. So I'm excited for the sequel to finally come out. The next one is also the sequel to The Tiger at Midnight. So in 2020, I read the sequel, The Archer at Dawn, and so I'm just so excited, and I love this series so much. It's one of the books where I talked about one of my favorite books of 2020 is one of the fantasy 5-star reads was The Archer at Dawn, and I talked in that video about how I feel like as the series goes on, I tend to just like each one better, because there's just so much more emotional payoff and like satisfying action resolution character payoff as the series goes on, and you find out more about them, and their plots and their worlds kind of evolve in a way that just feels so satisfying. So I'm very excited for the sequel for The Tiger at Midnight. And the last one has to be the sequel to Girls of Paper and Fire. So Girls of Fate and Fury, I'm so excited for Girls of Fate and Fury. I talked about in my series about YA fantasy series that I really loved, I talk about Girls of Paper and Fire and how much I love it and how nostalgic it is to me, like how, not even nostalgic, but like how meaningful it is to me. I've talked so much with Natasha over the years. I've gotten I've read all the arcs, I've gotten my book signed, I've met Natasha, like it's so meaningful to me, and I'm so excited for the sequel. It's been such a long journey, and I'm so excited because it's been, Girls of Storm and Shadow was a sequel that I knew I was going to love, but I didn't anticipate how much I was going to love it. And so I'm just so excited for Girls of Fate and Fury, which is why, in honor of that, I wore, have to like move around a little bit to show you, but I wore my Girls of Paper and Fire t-shirt, which has everybody's name on it, in honor, because I knew that I was going to talk about Girls of Paper and Fire, even though I barely wear t-shirts. But I have some t-shirts from some series that I really love. It is Girls of Paper and Fire, then there's The Fever King, and then there's Descendant of the Crane. I have like 3. They're all this style where it's, character names. I ended up doing that a lot in 2019, and I loved it. It was so fun to collaborate with people who really loved the series and talk about the names on the shirts and like what color the shirt should be, etc., etc. It was such a fun, creative, collaborative process. And so I have briefly thought about doing a series of Asian sci-fi fantasy, I think YA, but maybe not only YA, because I need to include Rin from the Poppy War, but names as well on a shirt. So if you have any recommendations, please let me know below. I have a few ideas about people that I want on my shirt. So that's been a process I've been thinking about for a couple years now. I want to say at least a year now. So with that, that brings me to the end of my 2021 series that I should probably read / keep up with. That's the working title in my head, but as you can see, it's a bad title. All I can tell you is that probably by the time you're watching this, I will have thought of a better title. But if not, and the thing that I've said is the title up above, please give me strength for 2021. Is all I'm saying. As always, I will leave all the links down below and my social media links down below as well. Let me know if you've read any of these series next to me. You can't see the pile, but this is where all the books are. And if you let me know in the comments, and a lot of people will like your comment, then maybe I will prioritize that book for the next month's TBR. So it's like a little impromptu comment voting kind of thing, because sometimes I look at, you know, all these series specifically on my list, and I think I just don't know which one I should start with, and I don't know necessarily enough about them to be like, okay, I really want to do that one next. So sometimes I do need a little push, you know, from the community, I need a little push from y'all. So as I said, let me know down below what one you want me to read first, and then upvote the ones that you want to read so that I don't get confused, and so the tallying is a lot easier. So have a great day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!